Are you interested in making your own yogurt at home in a very easy way?
Well, stick around and I'll show you how I use store-bought milk to make yogurt at a fraction of the cost. It's a lot healthier too. I'll give you a recipe, show you the steps, and walk you through the entire process. No Instapot needed for this homemade fruit yogurt recipe.
As with virtually all things, if you want to make your own yogurt, you'll need to make some adjustments to fit your specific needs and desires and other related conditions. Also, please be aware that yogurt is very high in calcium, and calcium interferes with the body's ability to absorb most thyroid medications for 3 to 5 hours. If you're taking a thyroid medication, do some research before deciding whether or not to eat yogurt for several hours after taking your medication. My yogurt is considered a regular yogurt versus a Greek yogurt, but if you prefer Greek yogurt, it's just one added step. I'll come back to differences between regular yogurt and Greek yogurt when we reach that step in the process. Another example to keep in mind is your altitude, weather, and geographic differences. At higher temperatures, the boiling point is different, and the humidity in your home may impact the evaporation rate of moisture from the yogurt.
I'll mention a couple of other variables too for you to keep in mind as we travel along this journey.
And there's the standard legal disclaimer. I'm not a health expert, nutritionist, chef, doctor, lawyer, or professional financial advisor. Nothing in this video should be interpreted as advice for anyone or anything. So let's get going.
I'm using a full gallon of whole fat milk, but if you're not expecting to eat that much, don't worry about it. This recipe can be modified very easily for any size batch that you want. I use full fat milk because humans actually need the fat to burn for energy. It's actually a lot healthier for us than a lot of the carbs that are out there, especially that added sugar. But don't take my word for it. Do some research and look it up on your own. The science is out there. But hey, if you want to use 2%, skim milk, any other kind of reduced fat milk, be my guest. I'm not going to stop you. Either way, you will need some milk and you'll need some yogurt as a starter. But that's a one-time purchase because once you've got the yogurt, you can use that yogurt as a starter for your next batch. So it's an endless supply. And if you have a cow or a sheep or a goat or camel or any other mammal that produces milk, you don't even have to buy that. You can just use what you already have on hand. Pretty much any of those milks will work for this product. I do a lot of shopping at Costco, and a gallon of milk at my local store costs about $3.50, give or take. But I'm curious, how about in your area, where you're from? How much is the cost of a gallon of milk versus a quart of yogurt? Let me know in the comments below.
You'll also need a pot large enough to hold the milk with some headroom, a spoon to stir, and 1 or more containers to store the finished product. I reuse jelly jars, but you can use a casserole dish, a bowl, or pretty much anything that will hold the yogurt. I prefer glass because the yogurt may pick up a metallic taste while it's in the fridge, and plastic is harder to truly disinfect. I use jelly jars because I have a lot of them, and because it's a little easier to fit them in my fridge. As for the spoon, I have used plastic, wood, and stainless steel, and I have not seen a difference between them. I tend to avoid stainless steel because I generally use a pot with a non-stick coating that can be easily scratched with a metal spoon. I let the milk sit out on the counter for about 30 minutes before starting, just to let the temperature start rising. Note though that if you're not planning to use the entire gallon, skip this step, or pour it into a smaller container that can be closed or covered while resting. Any milk that you plan on drinking later should not be left out of the fridge this long. Remember, this entire process involves manipulating bacteria. We need to make sure that only the yogurt bacteria is allowed to thrive. With that in mind, the first step is to kill any and all bacteria that may have made it into the milk. So after pouring the milk into a pot, set the heat at a little lower than medium. On a scale from 1 to 10, I'd start with the 4 and slowly increase it to about a 6 towards the end. But you'll want to keep an eye on the temperature and make adjustments as you go. You want to slowly increase the heat while occasionally stirring. The circulation will help the milk to heat more evenly and reduce scorching. The hotter it gets, the more you'll need to stir. Keep raising the temperature and keep stirring. And stirring. And stirring. And stirring. And checking the temperature. The temperature needs to reach over 180. At that point, there should be a lot of steam and the milk will start to froth. Also note that at higher temperatures, the milk will start to form a skin over the surface. If you keep stirring, that skin won't be able to form, yet. I hold it at this stage for a few minutes, allowing more moisture to evaporate, because I'm looking for a thicker, finished product. If you prefer a thinner, more liquid yogurt, skip that evaporation step. Turn the stove off and remove the pot from the heat, but keep stirring for another minute or two while the bottom of the pot cools a little. Off the heat, the risk of scorching is minimal, but depending on how well your pot holds heat, there is still some risk. So stir until the bottom of the pot is cooler than the milk itself. After that, I leave the pot to sit. I know some homesteaders will dip their pot into an ice bath to rapidly cool it back down. I don't like subjecting my cookware to that much of a temperature shock though, so I just let it rest on the stove. Either way, as the milk cools, it will form a skin over the top. That's okay, it's normal. Just let it be.
Let it be.
Depending on the ambient temperature inside your home, this step can sometimes take 30 minutes or longer. That's okay too. Use this time to check your laundry, your email, or just take a minute to stop and smell the roses. The temperature needs to drop back down to around 110 before we can move to the next step. While waiting, let me be the first to congratulate you.
For what?
If you have followed these steps, you've just successfully scalded milk. By bringing the temperature over 180, you've effectively killed off all the bacteria inside of it, and by lowering it back down to 110, you've made it safe for use in any recipe that calls for using scalded milk, such as making your own bread or dough. Scalded milk helps to make baked goods fluffier and can help carry flavors such as cinnamon, citrus, and vanilla. Speaking of vanilla, I add about a tablespoon or so of vanilla extract per gallon of milk. This is purely optional, and I do it just to provide a subtle base flavor. It can be added at any point in the process except while the skin is forming. You don't want to stir that skin into the milk. It won't hurt anything, but it's not pleasant to eat.
Trust me on this.
So I typically either add vanilla while the temperature is increasing, or I wait until after the temperature is back down to 110. Just scrape off the skin layer and stir in the vanilla. Nothing fancy. It's also time to add the yogurt starter. I add about a cup or so of yogurt per gallon of milk. Don't stress too much on this though. It's hard to not add enough, and you can't add too much. Experiment on each batch until you find what works best for you. The bacteria in the yogurt feeds on the milk's sugar, called lactose. As it eats the lactose, it multiplies, providing more bacteria to eat more lactose. That multiplication process continues until the milk runs out of lactose, or we put it into dormancy. More on that in a minute. If this is your first batch, you'll need to buy some yogurt to use as a starter. Try to find a package of plain yogurt with no additives such as fruit or granola, and as little added sugar as you can find. As stated before, I prefer full-fat yogurt. In any case though, the most important item to check on the label is to ensure that it includes live cultures. Personally, I bought multiple items and blended them together, because I found that while most of the cultures used in yogurt are the same across brands, there are some occasional variations. So my first batch included the most diverse collection of cultures I could get my hands on, and every batch I make is a new generation of those same cultures. So scrape off the skin layer, add vanilla, and add yogurt. As you stir it in, break up the clumps and let it dissolve. Try not to scrape the bottom of the pot while doing this though, because from my experience, there's almost always some milk scorched onto the bottom of the pot. If you scrape it off the bottom, make sure to remove it using a slotted spoon or filter it through a colander. Pour the liquid into one or more containers. I'm pouring mine into old jelly jars. Feel free to use a bowl, casserole dish, or something else. In any case, it is critical that the container is sanitized first, because in the next step, we need to give the yogurt cultures time to multiply and eat the lactose sugars. For the yogurt bacteria to do that, we need to intentionally leave it in conditions that allow other bacteria to grow as well. We've already ensured that the milk has no bacteria, and as long as we ensure that the containers have no bacteria, that means the only bacteria present is from the yogurt. We need to keep that around body temperature, or a little warmer while the yogurt develops. I use a dehydrator that I set to 105. If you don't have one, other options include wrapping the yogurt inside towels to hold in the heat, or putting it in the oven. If you put it in the oven, you can turn the heat to its lowest setting to warm, but then turn it off and wait for the heat to get back to 110 before you put the yogurt inside. Remember, you don't want to kill your live cultures. At this point, all the work is done. We just need to wait. I typically let mine develop for about 8.5 hours. The longer it develops, the thicker it will be, and the tangier it will be. So if you want more tang, let it develop longer. If you want a more mild flavor, end this step sooner. If you prefer Greek yogurt, at this point you'll need to separate the whey. Pour the yogurt into a cheesecloth or a coffee filter inside a colander inside a bowl. Let it sit for an hour or two to drain. By draining the whey, it tends to reduce fat content a little, reduce sugar content a little, and concentrate protein content a lot. This results in a thicker and more satiating end product. To intensify these effects, You can squeeze the yogurt within the cheesecloth to force out even more of the whey. Greek yogurt or regular yogurt, either way, put it in the fridge to chill. At refrigerator temperatures, the live cultures will go dormant. They will stop eating lactose. They will stop developing flavor and they will stop multiplying. It's still full of live cultures though. Make sure to keep some of this in reserve to use as a starter for your next batch. And then have fun with it. Try adding different flavors. Try letting it develop a little longer or stopping it a little sooner. Try adding different things to it when eating. I add fruit to mine to provide flavor variation, fiber, and a diversity of nutrients and micronutrients. I also add chia seeds, mostly because most everyone in America is drastically out of balance when it comes to omega-3 fats compared to omega-6 fats. With chia seeds, I can add a lot of omega-3 fats into my diet, and as a side bonus, I add it to my yogurt about 24 hours before I eat it. That way, it has time to ferment a little, and it soaks up the whey as it separates from the yogurt. For today's breakfast, I'm going with fresh orange, fresh kiwi, thawed from frozen blueberries, and some of my wife's homemade cranberry sauce.
Let's dig in. Okay, that's all I've got for you today, but until next time, I'm gonna keep on growing. You should too. And watch this video next.